Hello, welcome to the Crush the Cert, and it is the final part of the Scrum Guide breakdown. So we will be exploring essentials Scrum artifacts. You see here, we will be exploring today Scrum artifacts. Okay, let me take my. We will be exploring Scrum artifacts and the commitments which are with. These are the commitments we will be talking about. These are the Scrum artifacts. Okay, so before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Damodar Kumar, and I will be your host today. So let's start without wasting a single point time here. So in Scrum, the artifacts are the work or the value. Okay, so they are designed to maximize the transparency. There are three primary artifacts which I showed you before. Let's read them quickly and try to understand how it goes. So as I told you that the Scrum artifacts represent work or value. If someone, if you were in a confusion that what exactly artifacts mean, so it means representing work or value, and they are designed to maximize the transparency. Remember the three pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So this is one of the like kind of a element which is maximizing the transparency. The Scrum artifacts firstly represent work or value, and they are designed to maximize transparency of key information. Thus, everyone inspecting them has the same basis for adaptation. So I told you before multiple times that if you remember the three pillars, it will come back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, everywhere they will come. So again, let me quickly read it out for you. So Scrum artifacts represent work or value, right? It is designed for maximizing transparency of key information. Thus, everyone inspecting them but artifacts, inspecting the work has the same basis for adaptation, right? I will come to it, not to worry, but remember this or break that down into three parts. One part is the definitions. The Scrum artifacts represent work or value, and they are designed for maximizing transparency of the key information. And everyone who is inspecting them has the same basis for adoption. Just a single line of definition, and the three pillars are coming: transparency, inspection, and adoption. Okay, let's get started with the three artifacts now. So each artifacts contain a commitment. That's 100% true. And I showed you also. So there will be three artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment. And these are their commitments: product goal, sprint goal, definition of done. So these three came before. This also came before. And whenever the definition of done used to come, I used to skip it. But now we will be talking in detail now. Okay. So remember, these are the three artifacts: product backlog, sprint backlog, and increment, and their commitments: product goal, sprint goal, definition of done. Okay. Okay. So again, it's same thing written, which is like each artifact contains a commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency and focus, which progress can be measured. Yeah, that's 100% right. So these commitments, if you see here, these has a word goal written, right? And definition of done. So these, again, 100%, it enhances transparency and focus. against which progress can be measured. Because, yeah, for example, your goal, I took an example this time. Let's take a different example. So we are building a community website. Okay. So for example, like I'm taking a new example this time. For example, like there are 1,000 people watching this videos, which I am putting up. Daily 1,000 people watches video, or 100,000 people watches video. So for them, what I have asked them to is that visit the CrushTheCert.com website and create a login account, and you can ask any questions and someone will reply them. So what I'm trying to say is, so we are building a community. So the product goal is to build a community for like-minded people, or the people who are preparing themselves for the Scrum Master certifications, or they want to transition into Scrum Master roles. So our product goal here is to build a community, right? That's our product goal. And what product backlog will be, for building a community, we need to have the website. We need to have the login sign up option. We need to have an option to create a profile. We need to have an option to enable chat option or ask a question. We need to have an option for replying it, and the permissions should be available to all of the users. It should be public forum. So these types of items or elements will be in the product backlog, but the product goal will be to make a community where everyone can ask questions and all the members or the public can respond to that questions. That's the product goal. Okay. So when I say that because it's a big goal, right? To build a community. But for building the community, you need to put what needs to be done or what needs to be added, feature, bug, or any improvements which needs to be done. That will be all added into the product backlog, right? And this product backlog cannot be completed in one sprint. So it will be an iterative and incremental progress. So what will happen here is that we will be having a sprint planning session, if you remember now. So in this sprint planning, we will be working on sprint backlog, if you remember. So what we will be doing here is we will be picking those items from the product backlog which can be done in that sprint, right? Then the developers will be coming up with a plan to achieve that. And they should have the sprint goal. That's the three things needs to be done in the sprint planning. Otherwise, sprint planning cannot be completed. Okay. So for the sprint backlog. So sprint backlog is for that specific sprint, what all items were picked that will be in the sprint backlog. And for that, in order to commitment for the sprint backlog is the sprint goal. So for example, uh, one of our sprint goal in the very first sprint is to make that website should have a login and sign up feature. So, and the our community members should ask a question. So this is the basic thing. It should be done. So the sprint goal will be login or sign up and asking a question by the user. So these are the sprint, right? So that makes more sense now because the artifacts, these are the sprint backlog is the artifact and commitment is sprint goal, right? It sprint goal enhances the transparency and focus which progress can be measured. So now if I'm kind of a like Scrum team member and I want to check how the sprint is going on. So I would be have a clear answer that if our user can sign up or sign in on the website and they are able to ask a question, then we are doing the right thing, right? So 100% it enhances the transparency and focus against which progress can be measured. So if, for example, the team says that sign up is not done yet, so I will feel that we are lacking behind and we need to meet again and reprioritize what's happening and we reprioritize our approach or the items. Okay. The third one is for the increment, right? For the increment, it is definition of done. So the increment is again artifact, and the commitment here is definition of done. So let's understand what an increment is. So increment is the sum of all completed product backlog items during a sprint. So we have a sprint. So one item was an ability to sign up, an ability to sign in. So this was one item, and this was when it is completed, it means it, and then an increment has been done. One feature was that option to recover a password. If this is completed, then an increment is done. One feature was once a profile updation. A community user should able to add the first name, last name, email address, and about their like kind of work experience or what exactly they are looking here, some feedback and some maybe some questions, how they find us. So this is if it is done and an increment is done. Okay. So an increment is sum of all completed product backlog items during a sprint, right? Plus a value of previous increments at the end of each sprint. So increment is overall. It will be for all the increments for this sprint, sum of all the increments of this sprint, plus previous increments also. So at the end of each sprint, a new increment must be usable and meet the definition of done. So definition of done, we will be coming back on because that's the quality thing. And uh, let's do this way to reinforce. Okay, yeah, let me read that also here. Okay, so for increment now, it's a sum of all the increments in the current sprint and plus increments from the previous sprint. And in order to measure that increment, how is it going on, right? So if you see here, commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency. So definition of done, we will be reading now. So definition of done, if you try to understand, it is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets quality measures. So it describes the quality, right? I told you before, I remember it is to describe the quality. So definition of done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets quality. Just remember the word quality, right? For every increment which is placing in the sprint, it should meet the definition of done. So definition of done is the quality measures required for that particular product, right? Okay. So this is the three artifacts. Let's quickly read it. Okay. So the product backlog is an emergent. That's 100% right. Ordered list what is needed to improve the product. That's correct. It's a single source of work undertaken by the Scrum team. Our main goal here is only for the Scrum team is to complete the product backlog, which will combinedly achieve us what we want to achieve through in the product goal. So the product goal here is the commitment and product backlog is an artifact. So the product backlog item that can be done by the Scrum team within one sprint are deemed ready for selection in the sprint planning event. That's we know. They usually acquire this degree of transparency after refining activity. That's correct. That's what we do in sprint planning. Product backlog refinement is the act of breaking down and further defining product backlog items into more precise items. So we call it product backlog refining. So, for example, when we say that we should have an option for sign up, right? That's a product backlog. But while we are actually on the page, so product, it should be like we should have the UI, UX, user like interface, user experience ready, and also we should be making sure that what all needs to be added in the sign up, sign in, what all integration with the authorization, right? OAuth authorization. So I'm breaking down into further, right? Refining that particular user story of sign up into further more details. So product backlog refinement. Just remember, is the act of breaking down and further defining product backlog item into smaller, more precision item. This is an ongoing activity to add details such as description, order, and size. We'll come back, not to worry. Attributes often vary with the domain of work, not to worry. Okay. So the developers who will be So that the developers who will be doing the work are responsible for the sizing. So it's telling you about the like what all refinements we are doing up. They should be linked with the sizing. So this will be completed by us, by me, in the Jira. So not to worry now. Just keep an eye on the video. Just subscribe, and I will be uploading the complete admin type of resources in this YouTube and our crush.cert, crushthecert.com for the sizing, how the sizing is done, how the prioritization is done, what is sprint capacity, what is sprint velocity, what all historical data needs to be considered while we add those like user stories into the sprint planning. So not to worry, there will be a lot more coming up. So that's why I'm not want to make you into this phase now. Let's go slowly. So the product owner may influence the developer by helping them understand and select trade-off. So yeah, so developers will be helping them in understanding and selecting trade-off for the each element or in the product backlog refinement. Okay. So the product commitment here is product goal. You already know that. The product goal describes a future state of the product, which serves as the target for the Scrum team to plan against. The product goal is in the product backlog. That's correct. Rest of the product backlog emerges to define what will fulfill the product goal. That's correct. So let's take the same example. Our product goal was to make a community for the users where questions can be asked and answers can be given. And we have a like-minded people who are focused on achieving the Scrum Master or transitioning into Scrum Master goals. So this is the product goal. So all the item in the product backlog emerges to define what will fulfill the product goal. Sign up, reset password, option to ask question, option to search from the previous historical questions, answer questions to see like if they want to approach one of the colleague who can help in the community. Yeah, so these all the will be in the product backlog. Okay, so a product is a vehicle to deliver value. It has a clear boundary, known stakeholders, well-defined user or customer. A product will be a service, physical product, or something more abstract. A definition, not to worry. The product goal is the long-term objective of the Scrum team. That's why they are working for to achieve the product goal. They must fulfill or abandon one objective before taking on the next. That's correct. So that's why we have a sprint planning session. And in the sprint planning, we have a sprint backlog, plan to do that, and the sprint goal. So once the sprint start, we won't be disturbing that sprint. So we will be completing one objective only before we take on the another. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the second artifacts, the sprint backlog. Although I have already explained that sprint backlog is composed of the sprint goal, why, right? The set of the product backlog items selected for the sprint That's sprint backlog. And the third is actionable plan for delivering the increment. This was explained by me in the last class also, what comprises the sprint planning. So it's the sprint backlog is composed of the sprint goal, set of product backlog items, and actionable plan for delivering them. The sprint backlog is planned and for the developers. That's correct. Is highly visible real-time picture of the work that developers plan to accomplish during the sprint in order to achieve the sprint goal. That's correct. Consecutively, the sprint backlog is updated throughout the sprint as more is learned. That's correct. It should have enough detail that can inspect their progress in the daily scrum, right? So the commitment is sprint goal. Sprint goal is the single objective of the sprint. Although the sprint goal is committed by the developers, it provides flexibility in terms of exact work needed to achieve it. The sprint goal is creates cohesive coherence, focus, encouraging the Scrum team to work together rather than on separate initiatives. Okay. Let's. So the sprint goal is created during the sprint planning event and then added to the sprint backlog as the developers work with during the sprint. We keep the sprint goal in mind. So that's why it's commitment, right? If the work turns out to be different, then they are expected. They collaborate with product owner to negotiate the scope of the sprint backlog within the sprint without affecting the sprint goal. So if there is something which is not expected and it turned out, they will collaborate or chat with product owner to negotiate the scope of the sprint backlog within the sprint without affecting the sprint goal. Okay, so they will have a chat. An increment is a third artifact, so it's a concrete stepping stone towards the product goal, right? So in nutshell, our product goal is what is very, very important. And this is the concrete stepping stone towards the product goal. Each increment is additive to all the previous increment and thoroughly verified, ensuring all increment work together, right? In order to provide value, the increment must be usable. So it's self-explanatory. We have already understood what the increment was. Okay. Okay. So multiple increment may be created within the sprint. That's correct. The sum of the increment is presented at sprint review, thus supporting empiricism. That's correct. So that's what I'm saying. One increment was sign up, sign in. One increment was able to create a file. One increment was able to ask question. So these all increments should be able to work and they should meet the definition of done. Will come on that. And it should be like we will be presenting these increment at the sprint review. So it should be like supporting empiricism. So it will be like transparent, inspectable, like adaptation will be again, it supports empiricism. So how like it should be working, right? It should not be a presentation. However, an increment may be delivered to stakeholder prior to the end of the sprint, right? The sprint review should not be considered a gate to releasing value. Okay, work cannot be considered part of the increment unless it meets the definition of done. That's very, very, very important, right? Okay, so commitment definition of done. So the definition of done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets quality measure required for the product, right? So it's the same thing which I was telling you. It's a quality measure, right? So for example, the quality measure is uh, the sign in, sign up should ask these many questions. It should keep personal identifiable information safe. It should load in very, very fast. It should not hang. It should give a good UI UX experience. So these are all example. I'm just telling you about the quality measures. It can be included. So the same simple is the definition of done is a formal description of the state of increment. So increment here will be the sign in, sign up when it meets the quality measures required for the product, right? The moment of a product backlog item meets the definition of term, an increment is born, right? So once increment, we will be saying only when it meets the definition of done or it meets the quality, right? Okay. So the definition of done creates a transparency by providing everyone a shared understanding of what work was completed as a part of the increment. If the product backlog item does not meet a definition of done, it cannot, I repeat, it cannot be released or even presented at the sprint review because it didn't meet the quality. Instead, it will be returned to product backlog for future consideration. If the definition of done for an increment is a part of the standard for the organization, all Scrum team must follow as a minimum. If it is not an organization standard, the Scrum team must create a definition of done for appropriate for the product. If there is no particular standard definition of done for an increment, the Scrum team must create the definition of done and it should complete or pass that definition of done. Then it will be an increment and it can be reviewed at the sprint review. The developers are required to conform to the definition of done. If there are multiple Scrum team working towards on the product, they must mutually define and comply with the same definition of done. So if there are multiple Scrum team working, they should mutually define and comply with the same definition of done, right? Because they are working towards the same product, right? Okay. So it's finally completed, guys. So we have finally completed the Scrum guide. This is not to worry, you can read it out. This is nothing but a kind of acknowledgement to all the people who contributed to Scrum. So I would say thank you so much for watching this video. And if you need any help or any further information, please reach out to us. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and visit CrushTheCert.com for free quizzes, guides, and more certification prep content. So thank you for learning with CrushTheCert.com. Stay agile and keep improving. Thank you. Bye-bye.